buckle up for episode 6. We'll start off with Shauna. She gets home and Jeff has been worried sick because Shauna never told Jeff exactly where she was going. Initially, she apologizes, but then she realizes Jeff has no idea what happened to Lottie, so she fills him in on the fact that Lottie is dead. Apparently, she fell down the steps. It's all kind of shady. And Shauna flat out says Lottie was murdered. But as Shauna is saying this, Callie walked in the room and heard the whole thing, and she is floored. And Callie now realizes she needs to divulge something to her parents that she's been keeping a secret. It's the tape that she got. The tape that was addressed to her mom that she kept. Callie tells her parents that she didn't listen to it. She didn't know how to. But this definitely sets Shauna off. She doesn't think that it's a coincidence that the brakes, the freezer, the tape, she feels like it's all connected. At this point, Shauna's convinced that someone's trying to kill them, so she grabs the family and says, "We got to get out of here. We're going to a motel." Once Shauna and Jeff are alone, Jeff asks her, "How bad is it? Like, what is on those tapes?" And Shauna says, "I have no idea, Jeff. I've had the thing for 5 minutes, and I don't know how to play it." Shauna convinces Jeff to run outside and grab some snacks, and it gives her the ability to call up Taissa, but more importantly, to call up Van. Because this tape that they have is not just a normal cassette tape. It's something called a DAT tape. It's an antiquated technology. Only super nerds would have it, somebody like Van. When Shauna calls up Taissa to get Van on the phone, Taissa and Van had gone to a very fancy hotel to kind of just get away, pamper themselves a little bit, forget about what happened. This phone call from Shauna, though, interrupts that. Once Shauna does get Van on the phone, she explains that she has this DAT tape and she needs to play it immediately. She gives the address of where they're staying and says, "You need to drop off that DAT player. I need to find out what's on this tape." Once Van walks out of the bathroom to tell Taissa exactly what's going on, she sees that Taissa has ordered room service, like a lot of room service, and it does not sit well with Van. She yells at her, "What is wrong with you? Lottie is dead, Shauna is melting down, and you're acting like just everything's normal. Like all you care about is self-care." And Ty sits on the bed and says, "Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, I've lost my family, my career. Oh, the love of my life, she's battling cancer. Nat, Lottie, they're both dead, so maybe I just want to feel good for once." Van calmly tells her, "Hey, I understand about the whole live for the moment thing, but our friend seems really scared right now." And Taissa laughs and says, "What, about a tape? I mean, who even uses DAT tapes anymore?" Van thinks about it and says, "In my experience, weird garage bands and super intense birders, and the birders thing, it clicks." It not only clicks with Van, it clicks with Taissa too, and they rush out of that hotel to go find the DAT player. Van gets back to her place. She starts looking through boxes, and she does find the DAT player, but then something really weird happens. A phone, which is not connected to anything, starts ringing. Van picks it up and says, "Hello?" And the signal is really crackled. She can barely make out who's on the other end, but they say, "Van?" And Van's pretty convinced that it's Taissa. But whoever it is, the voice on the other end says, I can't. Help." And then it just cuts out. Ty then walks in the room, and Van looks like she's seen a ghost. But she doesn't tell Ty exactly what happened. She just grabs the DAT player, and they head off to the motel. They call up Shauna, and Shauna says, "Thank you so much. I'll meet you outside." And once Shauna gets off the phone, she tells Jeff and Callie, who's also in the room, "That was Van. I'm going to find out what happened on the tape." And right away, Jeff says, "I'll go with you." And Callie wants to know what's going on. She feels like she's a part of this at this point, and she wants to know what's on the tape as well. But both Jeff and Shauna say, "No, Callie, we can't. You have to stay here. We need to protect you. And not because you're helpless, but because we're your parents, and we haven't always been the best at keeping you safe." Callie then gets up and gives her mom a hug and just says, "I just want our family to be safe." But all of this was a ploy. She started using the record app on her phone, and she drops her phone in her mom's purse, so that way she'll find out exactly what the conversation was when Shauna meets with her friends. Shauna heads out alone. Jeff's going to stay with Callie. Shauna heads out to the parking lot where Van and Taissa are waiting for her, and she gets in the car, and they play the tape. You hear a woman on the tape say, "Testing, 1, 2, 3. And then she says, "Oh my God, what is this?" There's screaming on the tape as well, and finally the girls shut it off. And Van says, the only people that know about this are either us or dead. They start trying to figure out what to do about the situation. Taissa wanting to destroy it. Van saying, it's not the only copy. What does that matter? And Shauna pointing out, well, yeah, it's a threat, but right now it's only a threat to me. As Shauna continues to expound on this, she notices Callie's phone in her bag. And she stops everything she's doing. She tells both Van and Ty, I'm sorry, I have to go. It's an emergency. And then she leaves. She walks back in that hotel room very angry and grabs Callie and says, we need to have a chat one-on-one. She confronts Callie about the recording device, and Callie says, well, why wouldn't I do that? I have a right to know about this too. To which Shauna says, what do you know about this? You're a child. And Callie points out, I'm the same age as you when you were out in the woods. Shauna tells her very sternly, go, join your father, before I do something I'm going to regret. And Callie shakes her head and says, I just wanted to be close to you, and I thought you wanted that too. Callie walks out of the room, and she's able to find the recording, so she's able to listen to it and find out what they were talking about in that car. Now, as for Van and Taissa, they went back to the hotel, and Taissa was asleep. Van was doing research on DAT tapes. She couldn't sleep, but then all of a sudden, Taissa sat up in bed and said, Van, you gotta help. Van, you gotta help me. And that's basically exactly what Van heard on that phone. Immediately, Van tries to help Taissa, trying to get her out of this, but Taissa is in one of her spells, and she just calmly looks at Van and then goes back to sleep. Now, as for Misty, after she left Lottie's apartment, she wanted to find out about the DNA that she collected from under Lottie's fingernails. She went to a friend, she flirted with the guy to find out the information, and he agreed, I'll send it to you in a little bit. She then, however, got a text from Walter saying, what did you say to Shauna? Shauna won't return my calls. And Misty got real hostile in this text message, reminding Walter that this is her investigation and she's not sharing any information whatsoever. And then there was a few more choice words. A couple hours later, though, Misty gets a text from Walter saying, I'm sorry. Look left and consider this a peace offering. And a limo pulls up and a guy says, hey, are you Misty? I have a package for you. And he delivers her Lottie's trash. She gets another text from Walter saying, I couldn't see anything in this, but maybe a master investigator will. And while Misty is still mad at Walter, she does appreciate it. She takes the trash home and she does find something. It's the remnants of a Chinese takeout place that is not a really well-rated Chinese takeout place. The fact that Lottie would even eat here, that's really the puzzling thing that Misty can't understand. So Misty decides to head to this place and just scope it out, see if she can find any information about it, and she does. The delivery girl for this restaurant is Lisa, the girl from Lottie's cult. Misty follows Lisa to her next delivery, and she sneaks up on her and scares the crap out of her, and Lisa says, I'm sorry, you can have the money. I don't want any trouble, just leave my bike alone. To which Misty knocks the bike over. She then looks at her and says, I'm just trying to figure out who killed Lottie. And Lisa laughs, saying, you think I did it? And as the two talk it out, it does kind of make sense. I mean, Lisa lost her money, her clothes, her life. She's definitely got motive. But Lisa also says, it's not me. Some of us don't turn our trauma into murder. The two end up going to a cafe. They sit outside, and Lisa explains that the last time she saw Lottie, Lottie ordered a bunch of food, and then she gave her a $50,000 tip in an envelope that just said, I'm sorry. Lisa's had a lot of stuff not go her way, so when she got this, she didn't really ask too many questions. She just took the money. They then somehow get into an argument about what happened with Natalie, and about how Natalie was seemingly getting better until Misty and her friend showed up. Eventually, though, this moves into Lisa saying, Charlotte wasn't murdered, she fell down a flight of stairs. But if you really want to investigate this and go down this road, why don't you look at your friends? Taissa met with Charlotte the day that she died. At first, Misty doesn't believe that because Taissa never revealed that information, but Lisa tells her, I saw them outside the cafe. Misty heads home, and she's trying to make sense of all this when she gets the DNA email from her friend. The problem is she can't make any sense of it at all. With a little push from Caligula, she decides to send it to Walter saying, hey, I can't make heads or tails of this. Maybe you can. Now, as for the wilderness, Coach Ben is alive, but he certainly doesn't want to be. I mean, the guy's got a sliced Achilles tendon. He's missing a leg on the other side. Yeah, things aren't going well for Ben, and when he's given food, he doesn't want to eat it. At this point, Ben is not grateful. He wants to die. He actually begs Natalie to kill him, and then he begs just for Natalie to give him a knife so he can do it himself, but Natalie says, no, I'm not doing that. She simply hands him a plate of food and walks off. This, however, goes on for a couple of days, with them bringing Coach Ben food and Ben refusing to eat it and just begging them to kill him, trying to find new ways for them to kill him, but they still are adamant that they're going to keep him alive because of the vision that Akilah had. As Natalie just kind of hopes that eventually Coach Ben will eat, back in the regular camp, the girls are also trying to get used to this new relationship between Melissa and Shauna. The OG lesbians, Ty and Van, joke about the fact that Melissa probably has to put on Jackie's clothes when her and Shauna make out. But then they get serious for a second and say, yeah, it's a little weird, but Shauna does actually seem better, at least. Taissa, though, gets called away for a group leadership meeting about the fact that Ben still is refusing to eat. At this point, we're going on a week of him just with this hunger strike. Lottie's still saying that we need to keep him alive. He's our bridge home. But then the girls question maybe these visions that Akilah had weren't necessarily visions. They were just remnants of the past. Nat cuts in and says, look, either way, winter's around the corner and this bridge home thing is giving us hope. We're probably going to need that. So we're going to have to convince him to eat. It's not going to be easy, but Lottie has a suggestion on how to do that. The idea is basically to pin Ben down and force food down his throat. Natalie goes to Misty to tell her about the idea, and Misty's just beating herself up over the fact that A, she didn't think about this sooner, but B, the fact that all of this has happened to Coach Ben on her watch. While she's preparing the food that Ben is going to eat, Natalie asks her, hey, do you ever think that keeping him alive was a mistake? And Misty scoffs at that and says, no, absolutely not. I've kept him alive before and I'll do it again. But for Natalie, she is starting to have doubts. And once she walks away from Misty, Travis pulls her aside and says, hey, he's pretty bad, huh? And Natalie says, yeah, he's really, really bad. That's when Travis asks her, hey, what if what Akilah saw is just ridiculous nonsense? That's kind of confusing to Natalie because, after all, Travis is one of the people that has pushed Akilah to have these visions, and Travis is pretty sheepish about the fact that he also is having doubts about all of this. He tries to point out to Natalie, Lottie's had proclamations before that didn't pan out. But Travis doesn't go full bore with that idea. He's kind of just keeping it close to the vest. Once the food is prepared, Misty and the rest of the group go in and they shove the food right down Ben's throat against his will. Akilah is watching it and she's horrified and she starts to walk away, and Natalie grabs her and says, you better be right about this. Once everybody's done with the process, they look like they just went through a war. No one enjoyed it. Natalie then goes in the pen to check on Ben, and he asks her, why can't you just let me die? And Natalie, through clenched teeth, just says, because we can't. And she walks off. Later that night, Akilah decides to head to the cave once again just to see if she missed anything. She had a super weird vision about a bear in the camp that they had, and the bear ended up having 3 eyes. And once she wakes up, she starts crying and apologizing to Lottie because she doesn't know what any of this means. Back at the camp, though, Natalie couldn't sleep. She couldn't sleep knowing that Ben was seemingly being tortured. She had to do something about it. She starts walking to the pen that they were keeping Ben in, and she gets stopped by Travis, who says, why do you have that knife? And Natalie tells him, just go back to bed. You don't need to be a part of this. Travis reminds her, they're not going to forgive you for what you're going to do. But Natalie says, I don't care. You saw him. I have to do this if nobody else will. She then walks into the pen and she grants Ben's wish. She cuts his throat and she kills him. And when she walks out, she is a different person. She is changed. She's shook. She's covered in blood. And the girls, seeing this, realize what she did and they freak out at her. Misty especially is irate, screaming that Nat is a murderer. The girls start questioning how exactly they're going to get home now. What was Natalie thinking? And Taissa poses that they have another trial to figure out what to do with Nat. But Shauna cuts in and says, we're not doing another trial. She just admitted it. She's guilty. I think it's obvious what has to happen now. But that's when Lottie cuts in and says, Shauna will lead us. All the girls kind of look around at each other because, Shauna's a psychopath, but nobody objects to it. This new leadership role, though, does seem to change Shauna and make her a little more normal. She tells everybody, I know you're angry, but we're still a team, and we can't let this break us. When people die out here, we honor them. So Natalie's punishment is going to be preparing Coach Ben for the feast. Not like Natalie wants to do this, but she's forced to, and Shauna actually helps with the process. That night, the team gets together. They've got Coach Ben's head on a stick, and they start to dig in quietly. Lottie, however, at some point says, no, this isn't how it's supposed to happen. And she starts to hear faint laughter, but it's not coming from anybody in the camp. She then, out of nowhere, screams at the top of her lungs, seeming to scream at the team, taking everybody off guard. But then they hear that screaming coming from the woods, that primal scream that they've heard before. The screaming continues as Lottie gets up and just stares into the fire. All eyes are on her at this point. She encourages all of the girls to quote-unquote sing, but really what she wants them to do is scream. Because when she screams, this animal noise, whatever it is, it's screaming back at her. The girls start to join in, and next thing you know, everybody's screaming. The screaming turns into dancing around the fire, but then Lottie sees somebody in the distance walk by. At first, she thinks it's Ben, but it's not. It's two scientists. They walk into the camp, and the guy says, hello. The entire team is speechless at this point. They're shocked that somebody else is there. But then the guy sees Coach Ben's head, and he freaks out a little bit.
Thank you so much for checking out this recap. Please consider subscribing to the channel and subscribing to my Patreon. Hit thumbs up if you liked it. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. If you left a comment, I don't get back to you. I usually don't check the comments unless they're like a super comment. Also, if you don't see the next video up on the end screen, not to worry. It'll be up in a day or two.